We're going to start off, we're going to go to File, Open. If your Lesson 1 folder is not already open, go to your desktop and open Project Files and then the Lesson 01 folder. One of the new features of Excel 2007, Microsoft offers 3 file types. XLSX and XLSM files are much better than the legacy XLSB format because they're smaller and less prone to corruption. Personally, I almost always use the XLSM version of the files as it allows me the flexibility to record a quick macro if necessary. Although you will see me working with both XLSX and XLSM files in this training series, we'll only include regular XLSX files for all the lessons in this training, except Lesson 6. Just note that you will not be able to record any macros in the project files without converting them to XLSM files first. Other than the file name extension, your files are the same as mine. In Lesson 6, you'll have XLSM files that are ready for macro recording. And in Lesson 1, we're going to open the first file, the Advanced Subtotals topic. Advanced subtotals are a feature that have been added back in Excel 97 and really one of the very powerful ways to quickly summarize data. The Advanced Subtotals feature allows you to take your data set and very quickly add a subtotal for every customer, every region, every product, whatever you need to do. Now, in order to make subtotals work, the data has to first be sorted by that field. So we have a data set here with region, product, date, account, customer, quantity, revenue, cost of goods sold, and profit. And let's say that we want to create a summary by customer. The first thing we would have to do is sort the data by customer. Now, because my data has a heading above every row, I'm able to use the quick way to sort data. First, select a single cell. It has to be a single cell in the customer column, and then go to the Data tab of the ribbon. On the Data tab of the ribbon, we have 2 buttons, the A to Z and Z to A buttons that will sort either ascending or descending. I want to choose the A to Z button. And you'll see that our data is now sorted with the first customer alphabetically at the top. Now, before the subtotals command came along, if we needed to add a subtotal for every customer, it would have been really quite tedious. We would have had to hit page down and then find the break between the customers. We could use the insert row command to add a new customer, and then the AutoSum function in order to add the totals. You can imagine that if you had 100 or 300 or 500 customers, this would be a very, very tedious operation. Luckily, we don't have to go through those steps. We can create them all in one command using the automatic subtotals command. To start with automatic subtotals, make sure that you have one cell in your data set selected, and on the data ribbon, use the subtotal icon. The subtotal dialog box appears, and initially it always wants to subtotal by each change of the leftmost column. Now, in our case, that's the region column. And then it will always want to add the sum function to the field that is the rightmost column. In this case, that's the profit column. Now, of course, none of this matches the task that we want to use today, so we're going to modify some settings in the subtotal dialog box. In the first dropdown, at each change in region, we're going to choose that we want to subtotal at each change in customer. You always want to make sure and look at the use function dropdown. Excel has very strange rules. If the rightmost column happens to be a column that contains text, or even a column that contains blanks, Excel will choose to count instead of to sum. This can cause unexpected results, so always make sure that the second drop-down says sum, and then you have to go through and select the fields that you want to add the subtotals to. In this case, it would make sense to do it to profit, as they suggest, but also cost of goods sold, revenue, and quantity. There's a setting at the bottom of the dialog box for a page break between groups. If you wanted every customer to have its own report, you could choose that option, but right now we're just going to click OK and watch how fast Excel can add the subtotals. There, in just a matter of seconds, Excel has gone through and added subtotals. Let me page down so we can see the break between the first and second customer. There in row 67, Excel automatically inserted a new row for us and added the subtotal commands in columns F, G, H, and I. You'll see in row 72 that Excel added a new total for the next customer, and as I page down through the data set, you'll see that Excel has added subtotals throughout the data set. You'll have to admit that this is much easier than adding subtotals the old way. Basically, in one command, we were able to add 20, 30, 40, 50 subtotals in seconds instead of the process that would normally take hours. Now, once the subtotals are in, there's many very powerful features that we have. The first thing that you have to notice is that there are group and outline buttons to the left of column A. There's 3 new buttons there, the 1, 2, and 3 buttons. And I'm going to press the 2 button to show you the customer summary that we'll get. When I press the number 2 button, I see just the customer subtotals. This is a great report to print to give to your manager if you need to see totals by customer. There's also a number 1 button. When I press that button, you'll see just the grand total. Now, this seems a little silly to me and not quite as useful. When you press the number 3 Group and Outline button, Excel shows you all of your detail rows again. Now, there's many tricks that we have when you have the dataset collapse to show the number 2 Group and Outline button. When I first saw automatic subtotals, I was so happy that we had this data. I said, certainly we'd be able to take this customer data and copy it to a new worksheet where I would have just the customer totals. However, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. If I choose the dataset and then use Control-C to copy, create a new workbook, and then Control-V to paste, unfortunately, Excel brings all of the detail rows that were hiding behind the subtotals. This is so frustrating that Excel could give us something as powerful as subtotals, but not a good way to copy just the subtotal rows. Well, it turns out that there is a way, although it's very, very, very obscure. Let me return back to my original data set. And again, the trick is that we need to select the customer totals, including the heading in E1 down to the grand total in row 592. Once we have that data selected, there's a few different ways to select just the subtotal rows. The first method, which is more intuitive but is certainly harder to remember, is to go to the Home ribbon. On the Home ribbon, on the right-hand side, we have the Find and Select dropdown. In the Find and Select dropdown, there's a choice for Go to Special. The Go to Special dialog is one of the most powerful dialog boxes, and it's really hidden. The Go to Special dialog box allows you to, for example, choose all of the cells that have formulas, all of the cells that are blanks, all of the cells that are precedents of the current cell, the last cell in a data set, or what we need in this very case is visible cells only. Now, when I select visible cells only, you can barely make out that Excel has added little white bands between the hidden rows. This is saying, hey, there's data back here that's hidden that's currently not in our selection. Now, when I use Control-C, you'll actually see that we've selected just the individual rows. I can now go to my new workbook and paste to get just the customer totals. Now, what you find interesting is, of course, they changed those live formulas in the customer total lines to be values. And when you think about it, really, that's the only choice that Microsoft had when they're taking just the customer total rows. So, a very cool way to take just the customer totals from the number 2 Group and Outline button and get them out here to a brand new worksheet. You can now send this worksheet off to a manager or to whoever needs to see a totals by customer. Let me switch back to my original data set.